The border was quiet that morning. Space around the Veil Nebula was always quiet. The thick purple clouds of gas and dead stars spread across the edge of charted space like a wall no one ever crossed. The Valorian Empire had marked it a dead zone centuries ago. Their ships had tried going in, twice. Neither came back. So the Empire drew a line on the map, posted a few patrol cruisers, and called it done. Lieutenant Harvin of the patrol cruiser Sorix Edge had been sitting at his post for 6 hours without a single alert. He was reading a report. He was half asleep. The stars were still. The veil was still. Everything was exactly as it always was. Then the sensors screamed. Something was coming out of the veil. Harvin sat up straight and stared at his screen. A massive object was pushing through the edge of the nebula clouds, slow and heavy, the way a wounded animal moves when it has been walking for a very long time. The cruiser's computer began running identification scans immediately. The results came back in seconds, and Harvin read them 3 times because the first 2 times he thought he had made a mistake. Human vessel. Class. Deep exploration. Registry number. UESS 447. Name. Ardent Horizon. He knew that name. Everyone in the Empire knew that name. The Ardent Horizon had been the pride of the human fleet when it launched 17 years ago. The humans had sent it into the Veil Nebula on an exploration mission. No one had told them not to, because the Empire had not yet explained to the newly joined humans why the Veil was off limits. By the time the warning reached the Human Council, the ship was already gone. The Empire searched for 2 years. Nothing. Not a piece of metal. Not a signal. Not a body. The ship simply vanished, and the 312 crew members with it. That had been 17 years ago, and now it was back. Harvin opened a channel to the ship immediately. His hands were not entirely steady. UESS Ardent Horizon. This is Imperial Patrol Cruiser Sorix Edge. Please identify yourself and state your condition. There was a pause. Just a few seconds. Then a voice came through the speaker. A calm, clear, female voice. No static. No distortion. As clean as if the ship were parked right next door. Sorix Edge. This is Commander Yael Dross of the UESS Ardent Horizon. We are in good condition. All crew accounted for. We are requesting permission to proceed to Velos Prime Station. Please advise. Harvin stared at the speaker. He pulled up the original crew manifest of the Ardent Horizon on his second screen. Commander Yael Dross. Age at time of departure. 34 years. That would make her 51 now, if she had been alive. The voice on the channel did not sound like a 51-year-old woman who had spent 17 years lost in the worst place in the galaxy. It sounded like a woman who had just woken up from a good night's sleep. He called his captain. Captain Solon arrived on the bridge in less than 2 minutes. She listened to the recording of the transmission. She looked at the ship on the screen. The Ardent Horizon was close enough now that the visual sensors could get a clear image, and what they showed made her go very still. The ship was the right shape, the right size. The basic hull design was human, recognizable, but everything else was wrong. The surface of the ship was covered in material that her sensors could not identify. Not damaged, not repaired badly. Changed, deliberately, carefully, with obvious skill. The metal had been layered and worked into something new, something that her computer could not find in any database. And across the hull, cut deep into the surface in long, clean lines, were geometric shapes, patterns, symbols. They were not human. They were not Valorian. They matched nothing in the Imperial records. Solon sent a full report to Imperial Command and received orders in under an hour. Escort the Ardent Horizon to Velos Prime Station. Keep it under observation. Allow no one on or off until intelligence arrived. Treat the crew with courtesy. Do not let them feel like prisoners, even though they were. During the trip to the station, Solène tried to speak with Commander Dross several times. The commander was always polite. She answered basic questions without any problem. Yes, the crew was healthy. Yes, they had enough food and water. Yes, the ship's systems were functioning. But when Solon asked where they had been, or what had happened to them, or how the hull had been changed, The commander's answers became short. "We'll explain everything at the proper debriefing," Dross said once. "Can you give me something now?" Solon pressed. "Anything?" There was a pause on the line. Then Dross said, very quietly, "We found things out there, Captain. Things that were put there a long time ago. I think some people already know that, and that's why they never went looking." She closed the channel after that and did not open it again for the rest of the journey. News of the ship's return spread before they even reached the station. Human news networks picked up the story from border communications chatter. Within hours, every human colony world was watching. People cried in the streets. Families of the crew members, who had spent 17 years learning to live without their loved ones, sat in front of screens and shook. Politicians made statements. Religious figures made statements. Everyone had something to say. The Valorian High Council said nothing publicly. Privately, they moved very fast. Intelligence agent Sarak Vel was pulled from another assignment and redirected to Velos Prime Station within the same day the news broke. He was one of the Empire's best analysts. Sharp, patient, capable of sitting through a long conversation and hearing the thing that was not said. He had handled difficult situations before. He was not easily surprised. He read the full sensor report on the way to the station, including the hull analysis and the visual records of the geometric markings. He looked at them for a long time. He made a note in his private file that he shared with no one. The symbols were not random. They had a structure, a grammar. Whatever had carved them into the hull of a human ship was not decorating it. It was writing something. When the Ardent Horizon finally docked at Velos Prime Station, a large reception was waiting. Human officials, Imperial observers, medical teams, security personnel standing in careful positions that were meant to look casual and did not. The docking clamps locked. The station tunnel connected to the ship's airlock. Lights blinked green. Everyone waited. The airlock opened. The first person to step through was a young man. He had a crew ID badge clipped to his chest. Sarak Vel's aide pulled up the crew manifest instantly and found the name, then went pale. She leaned close to Sarak Vel and whispered, "That man is listed on the original manifest." "But sir, there's a note." "He died in a training accident 2 years before the ship launched. He was never on board." Sarak Vel looked at the young man. The young man looked back at him with calm, clear eyes and smiled in a small, polite way. The room was very quiet, and the Ardent Horizon hummed behind him, its strange hull warm under the station lights, its unknown symbols patient and still, like words waiting to be read. His name was Peter Wenz. According to every record the Empire and the human government had on file, Peter Wenz was dead. He had been a junior engineer, assigned to the Ardent Horizon during its early construction phase. 2 years before the ship launched, he had been killed in a training accident on the orbital platform where the ship was being built. The incident report was filed. The death certificate was signed. His family had held a funeral. His name was taken off the active crew list and replaced with someone else. And yet he was standing in the docking corridor of Velos Prime Station, 27 years old, the same age he had been when he died, holding a small travel bag and looking around at everyone, staring at him with the mild, patient expression of a person waiting for a bus. Sarak Vel stepped forward. He kept his voice level and professional. "Welcome back," he said. "We have a lot to talk about." Peter nodded. "I know," he said. "We've been expecting this part." The debriefings began the next morning. The Empire wanted individual interviews. The Human Council sent their own representatives to observe. A team of 12 doctors, half human, half Valorian, began running medical examinations on every crew member, beginning with the most senior officers. What they found in those first 24 hours was enough to make the lead Valorian physician sit down in the middle of her own lab and simply stop talking for several minutes. Every single member of the crew was in perfect health. Not good health, not recovered health. Perfect. No signs of muscle loss from long confinement. No vitamin deficiencies. No psychological stress markers in the blood chemistry. Their bones were dense. Their immune systems were running at levels medical science had never recorded in any living person outside of theoretical models. And every one of them, from the oldest crew member to the youngest, showed the same biological age they had been at the moment of departure, 17 years ago. The telomere readings were what broke the physician's composure. Telomeres were the tiny protective caps on the ends of DNA strands. They shortened naturally as a body aged. It was one of the most reliable measures of biological time. Every member of the Ardent Horizons crew had telomeres that were not just the same length as 17 years ago. They were longer. Their bodies had not aged. They had reversed. Whatever had happened to them out there had not simply stopped time. It had run it backward, carefully, like someone rewinding a clock. The memory interviews were stranger still. Each crew member was taken separately into a quiet room and asked to recount everything they remembered from the mission. They all started well. They remembered the launch. They remembered the long journey to the edge of the Veil Nebula. They remembered entering the clouds, the way the sensors had gone strange, the way the ship had moved differently in that thick, heavy space. They remembered going deeper. They remembered light, an unusual light, not from a star, something else. And then, they remembered waking up. They were at their posts. The ship was moving. The veil was behind them. The instruments showed they were heading toward charted space, and the date on the ship's clock was the current date. And they all felt fine, rested, even, clear-headed. A little quiet inside, the way a person feels after finishing a long book that moved them deeply. The gap in their memories was not painful. It was not frightening. Every single crew member, when asked to describe the feeling of the gap, used similar words. Warm. Clean. Like something was handled for us. One woman said it felt like the blank space between falling asleep and waking up. You knew time had passed, but the time had not hurt you. The investigators cross-checked the timestamps of when each crew member reported waking up in their own memory. All 312 of them had the same exact moment, the same second. They all returned to awareness simultaneously, as if a single switch had been thrown for all of them at once. All of them, except Commander Dross. Her memory timestamp was 6 seconds later than everyone else's. 6 seconds in which she had experienced something the others had not. When asked about those 6 seconds, she did not claim she couldn't remember. She said she remembered clearly. She said she was not ready to share it. And she said it in a voice that was so calm and so complete that the interviewer found herself unable to push further. There was no fear in Dross. There was no evasion. She simply held those 6 seconds the way a person holds something fragile, carefully, close to the chest. Sarek Vel conducted her interview personally on the second day. He had read everything. He sat across from her in a plain room with a small table between them. He studied her face. She had the look of a woman who had made decisions and was at peace with them. That, in his experience, was either the mark of a saint or someone very dangerous. Sometimes both. You planned the return, he said. Not a question. We were ready for it, she replied. The timing of the AI transmissions to the human colonies. The cargo containers. The crew's coordination when you docked. This wasn't a ship full of people confused about what had happened to them. You had a plan. She looked at him steadily. Would you like to ask me something specific? What did you find out there? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, there are things in the deep parts of this galaxy that the Empire decided not to know about. Regions that were marked off limits, not because they were dangerous, but because whoever mapped them first was afraid of what was inside. We found those things, and they were not happy that your Empire had simply forgotten them. It was the most she had said in any interview. It was also, Sarek Vel noted, the most frightening thing he had heard in 20 years of intelligence work. The case of Peter Wenz remained unexplained. He sat through his medical examination without complaint. He was, physically, perfectly real. He was not a copy. He was not a machine wearing a face. His DNA matched the original records on file. When asked how he came to be on the ship when he had never launched on it, he said only that he had been on it when they came back, and that seemed like the thing that mattered. On the third day, one of the junior crew members, a cartographer named Davi Soon, stopped eating breakfast in the middle of the meal, picked up a stylus, and began drawing on a napkin. He drew quickly, without looking down, his eyes slightly unfocused. The person sitting next to him watched for a moment, then called for the medical team. Soon was drawing the geometric symbols from the hull of the Ardent horizon. He drew them with perfect accuracy, the exact proportions, the exact angles, the exact sequence. He had no formal art training. His service record listed his only creative hobby as chess. When the medical team reached him, he was on his fourth napkin, still drawing, his hand moving without stopping. He was not frightened. He looked almost peaceful. "I don't know why I'm doing it," he told them when they gently took the stylus away. "I just feel like if I stop, I'll forget something important." They let him keep the stylus. By the end of the first week, the Imperial High Council had issued a quiet internal order. Classify the entire event. Restrict public information. Label it a recovery operation. Give the humans their people back. Keep the ship under observation. And tell no one what the medical teams had found. The human government received this order and responded the way humans almost always responded when told to be quiet and trust someone else. They said no, loudly. And in the cargo hold of the Ardent horizon, still in the dark, still warm, 17 sealed containers sat waiting. Their surfaces were smooth and unmarked. Their locks were built for human hands. And no one on the crew had yet mentioned they existed. No one on the crew needed to. They had been part of the plan all along. It was a young Imperial inspector who found them first. She had been sent into the cargo hold of the Ardent horizon as part of a routine sweep. Routine meaning nobody expected to find anything, and her job was mostly to check boxes on a form. The hold had been listed as empty on the ship's original departure manifest. Empty cargo holds were checked last and quickly, because there was nothing to look at. She walked in with a scanner and a light, and she found 17 containers lined up against the far wall. They were not small. Each one came up to her shoulder and was about as wide as a doorway. They were a dark, gray color, smooth, without any labels or markings on the outside. She pressed her scanner against the nearest one and got almost nothing. The material was thick enough to block most of her equipment's signals. What did come through told her the interior was warm, a few degrees above room temperature, as if something inside was generating a very small, steady heat. She tried to open it. The lock mechanism lit up under her touch, but instead of the usual panel or keypad, it simply showed a soft blue light and waited. She pressed her hand against it. Nothing. She tried her ID chip. Nothing. The light kept waiting. She filed her report within the hour. By the next morning, the 17 containers had become the most important objects in the Empire. The argument over who had the right to open them lasted 4 days. The Imperial High Council said the containers were found on a ship docked at an Imperial station, which made them Imperial property. The human government said the containers were on a human ship crewed by human citizens, which made them clearly human. 3 different legal teams got involved. 7 meetings were held in rooms with very thick walls. Voices were raised in most of them. It was eventually agreed that the containers would be opened in a joint session. A large, secure room at Velos Prime Station was prepared. Imperial representatives sat on one side of a long table. Human representatives sat on the other. Medical and scientific staff lined the walls. Security stood at every door. Sarek Vel stood near the back, watching. Commander Dross was brought in to supervise the opening. She did not look nervous. She looked like a teacher waiting for students to open a test she had already marked. One by one, the containers were brought in on low hover platforms. One by one, a human crew member from the Ardent horizon stepped forward, pressed their hand against the lock, and the blue light turned green. The locks released with a sound like a slow breath. The first 6 containers held data, enormous amounts of it, stored on physical media that human engineers recognized, but that used a compression method no one had seen before. It took the technical team 3 hours just to begin reading the index. What they found, when they did, made the senior human scientist in the room sit down very slowly and put her face in her hands. Star maps. Thousands of them. Detailed, accurate, verified against current sky positions. They showed regions of space beyond the Veil Nebula sectors that went on for thousands of light years. Habitable worlds, resource systems, routes between them, laid out as clearly as roads on a city map. None of it was on any Imperial chart. Not because it hadn't been discovered. The data made it plain that these regions had been known for a very long time. The star positions matched historical references in the oldest Imperial astronomical records, references that had always been assumed to be errors or myths. They were not errors. Someone had mapped this space, and then someone else had made sure the maps never went anywhere. The Valorian representatives across the table went very still and very quiet when this was explained to them. Two of them looked at the floor. One looked at the ceiling. None of them said anything. Containers 7 through 11 held something even older. Physical records, books, inscribed tablets, data cylinders in 17 different languages, none of which were currently spoken. The ship's AI had spent the journey home translating them, cross-referencing patterns, building a working understanding of each one. The translations were included. They told the same story, over and over, in 17 different voices, from 17 different civilizations that no longer existed. The story was this: the Valorian Empire was not the first. It was not the second, or the third, or even among the first dozen. Before it, there had been others great civilizations, spread across the galaxy, some of them peaceful, some of them powerful, some of them both. And before all of them, there had been something else. Something very old, very patient, and very intentional. This old thing had not been destroyed. It had not died. It had simply finished what it was doing in this part of the universe and moved on. But before leaving, it had arranged things. It had set conditions. There were regions of space that were to be kept accessible. There were histories that were to be passed on. There were inheritors that were to be allowed to develop freely, without a ceiling being placed on them by whatever civilization happened to be dominant at any given time. The Valorian Empire had inherited this arrangement without fully understanding it. And somewhere along the way, through fear, or arrogance, or simple bureaucratic laziness, they had let parts of it slip. Maps disappeared from official records. Languages went unstudied. The Dead Zone label went on the Veil Nebula, and the patrols went up, and the questions stopped being asked. Containers 12 through 15 were the ones that cracked the silence in the room. The schematics inside were technical. Engineering documents, energy systems, propulsion designs, medical applications, material science. The lead Imperial scientist who reviewed the first 5 pages later described it as looking at a blueprint for a machine when you had only ever seen a drawing of a wheel. The technology was not incomprehensible. It was simply centuries ahead. And every document in every one of those 4 containers was addressed, in clear and current human language, to humanity specifically. Not to the Valorian Empire, not to the galactic community at large, to the humans, by name, by species designation, by the specific catalog number the humans used for themselves in their own interstellar registry. Someone had known humanity would come. Someone had prepared these things for them. Someone had been waiting. Container 16 was empty when they opened it. The interior walls were bare and clean. A few people in the room exhaled in mild disappointment. Then one of the human crew members, the cartographer, Davi Soon, still carrying his stylus, stepped forward without being asked, reached in, and pressed his palm flat against the interior wall. The geometric symbols lit up, covering every surface of the container's interior in warm, steady gold light. The symbols shifted and moved, slowly, like something being read aloud in a language made of shapes. No one in the room could read them, but no one in the room could look away either. They watched in complete silence for almost 2 full minutes before the light faded. Soon withdrew his hand. He looked at his palm. He was smiling in a small, private way. Container 17 was the last one. Its lock was different. It had the same blue light as the others, but it stayed blue when anyone touched it. Human or Valorian, crew or staff, it simply waited and did not open. Commander Dross had been standing at the edge of the room the entire time, watching. Now she walked to the container, pressed her hand against the lock, and it opened immediately, as if it had been waiting specifically and only for her. Inside was a single object, a cylinder, about the length of her forearm, made of a material that looked like metal but felt like something warmer. She took it out. She looked at the room full of people looking back at her. "I'll need a few minutes," she said. They gave her a private chamber. She was inside for 11 minutes. The security feed outside the door showed nothing unusual, just a closed door and two guards who spoke to each other quietly while they waited. When she came out, her eyes were red. She had been crying, and she was not trying to hide it. She handed the cylinder to the nearest human official, who took it carefully with both hands. She did not say what was written inside. She did not say what it had told her. She walked back to the main room and stood in her spot at the edge, and looked at the 17 open containers. In the Imperial High Council chambers, an emergency session began within the hour. For the first time in recorded history, all public broadcasts from the council were suspended. The screens that normally carried council proceedings went dark across the Empire. Citizens on 100 worlds looked at their blank screens and felt something they couldn't name. That night, a message leaked out of the council chamber through channels no one was able to trace afterward. It reached human news networks and was broadcast before anyone could stop it. It was 4 words, in Old Imperial cipher, that any decent historian could read. They were always watching. The Empire gave no comment. The council remained in session. And in the secure storage room at Velos Prime Station, 17 containers sat open and empty in the dark, having given up everything they had been carrying for a very long time. The Empire moved fast. Within 48 hours of the containers being opened, the Valorian High Council had drafted a formal resolution. It had 3 parts. First, the events surrounding the return of the Ardent Horizon were to be classified at the highest level. Second, humanity's provisional membership in the Empire was to be suspended pending a full security review. Third, the Ardent Horizon and its crew were to be transferred to Imperial custody for the duration of the investigation. They called it a containment protocol. What it was, in plain language, was panic wearing a uniform. But there was a problem. Commander Dross had known this moment was coming. On the day the Ardent Horizon re-entered monitored space, before it had even reached Velos Prime Station, before anyone had boarded it or searched it or opened a single container, the ship's AI had quietly done something. It had broken its communications into dozens of small, ordinary-looking data packets. The kind of routine traffic that crossed Imperial space thousands of times a day and was never checked closely. It had routed these packets through relay stations across the Empire, and it had delivered them to 12 human colony worlds. Each packet contained a full copy of everything in the containers. The star maps, the historical records, the schematics, all of it, already translated, already organized, already indexed for easy reading. By the time the Imperial Resolution was drafted, the information was already in 12 different places at once, copied and stored by human governments who had been quietly waiting for exactly this signal. Dross had set it up before they docked. She had planned for the Empire to try to bury it. She had made burying it impossible. The reaction was not immediate. It took 3 days for the human colonies to understand what they had received, and another 2 for the information to begin spreading to human citizens in formats they could read and share. But when it moved the way fire moves in dry grass. Fast and wide and impossible to stop from the outside. The Valorian resolution collapsed before it could be formally passed. It collapsed because of the Thenari. The Thenari were one of the 3 non-Valorian species with full membership in the Empire. They were older than humanity in space travel but younger than the Valorians, and they had always quietly resented the way the Valorian High Council ran things. Not loudly, not in ways that caused direct trouble. Just a low, steady resentment passed down through generations of Thenari diplomats who smiled at council meetings and went home and said what they actually thought in private. The Thenari ambassador to Velos Prime was a woman named Essa Thar. She was 60 years old by human standards, experienced, patient, and very good at choosing her moments. When the Imperial resolution hit the council floor, she chose her moment. She stood up and said that the Thenari delegation would not be supporting the resolution. She said that the historical records recovered from the Ardent Horizon confirmed what Thenari historians had been quietly arguing for 200 years, that the Empire's exploration charts had been deliberately, artificially limited, and that this limitation had prevented free member species from accessing regions of space that were rightfully open to them. She said that what had been done to the star maps was not a bureaucratic oversight. It was a political decision made without the knowledge or consent of the Empire's member species. And she said the Thanari considered that a serious breach of the foundational agreements of membership. 2 other non-Valorian species followed her within the hour. The Duresh and the Makovel, both long-standing members, both with their own historical grievances, stood and said the same things in their own words. The council chamber, which had been moving toward a quiet and firm suppression of the entire situation, suddenly became something else entirely. It became a reckoning. Sarek Vel watched all of this from the outside. He had been removed from the active case after the containers were opened. The council decided his initial reports had been too sympathetic to the humans, which was the kind of accusation that was really about something else. He understood that. He did not argue. He requested a private meeting with Commander Dross. He expected to be denied. He was not. She met him in a small room near the docking bays. Just the 2 of them. No aides, no recorders. She brought 2 cups of tea. He wasn't sure where she had gotten them. He sat down across from her and looked at her for a moment. "You knew the council would try to suppress it," he said. "Yes. You built the AI transmission into the plan before you even docked." "Yes. How long before?" She wrapped both hands around her cup. "Before we entered the Veil the first time," she said. 17 years ago. We talked about it as a crew, early in the mission. We all agreed that if we found something real out there, the first thing any powerful government would try to do was own it. We didn't want it owned. We wanted it shared. Sarek Vel was quiet for a moment. He thought about the years he had spent working for an institution he had believed in. He thought about the star maps in the containers. He thought about the historical records and the deliberate silences in the exploration charts he had used his entire career without ever questioning. "What did the cylinder say?" he asked. "The one in the last container." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "It said thank you." He left the intelligence service that afternoon. His resignation was filed quietly, and he requested asylum with the human delegation the same evening. It was granted within the hour. The human ambassador shook his hand and said they were glad to have him. In the Imperial Senate, the human ambassador, a sharp-tongued woman named Lyra On, was given the floor the following day. She had been requesting it for a week. With the Thanari, Duresh, and Makovel now publicly aligned with humanity's position, the council could no longer simply refuse. She spoke for 40 minutes. She did not shout. She did not perform. She stood at the podium and presented the case the way a surgeon works. Precise, clean, without any extra movement. She laid out the timeline of the star maps, and when they disappeared from official records, she showed the passages from the 17 ancient languages that described the arrangement the old civilization had left behind. She compared the dates of exploration restrictions in imperial law against the dates the records showed those restrictions should have been lifted. She named the decisions and the decision-makers, going back 400 years, drawing a straight line from deliberate choices to deliberate silence. She did not say the Empire was evil. She said the Empire had been afraid, and that fear had made it small, and that small things tried to make everything around them smaller too. She was 3 minutes from finishing when every screen in the Senate chamber flickered. For exactly 4 seconds, the geometric symbols from the hull of the Ardent horizon covered every surface, every monitor, every display panel, the main broadcast screen above the podium, the personal screens on every senator's desk, all of them, at the same moment, showing the same symbols, perfectly clear. Then they were gone. Every screen returned to normal. No alarms triggered. The technical team that investigated afterward found no evidence of any intrusion, any external signal, any hack or breach of any kind. The displays had simply shown something they had not been told to show. The Senate was very quiet after that. Imperial security made their move that evening. 2 officers arrived at the Ardent Horizon's docking corridor with a formal detention order for Commander Dross. They had legal authorization. They had backup waiting in the corridor behind them. They announced themselves clearly and professionally and stepped forward. The crew of the Ardent Horizon was already there, all 312 of them, standing in the docking corridor in a loose, broad formation, filling the space completely. No weapons. Nothing in their hands. No shouting. No aggression. No threats. They simply stood there, looking at the security officers with the same calm, clear expression their commander wore. The same expression Peter Wenz had worn when he stepped off the ship on the first day. Patient. Present. Completely unbothered. The security officers stopped walking. They stood there for almost a full minute, looking at 312 human faces looking back at them with perfect stillness. Then the lead officer stepped back. She quietly told her team to stand down. The detention order was not served. No official explanation was ever given for that decision. In her personal notes, filed years later, the lead officer wrote only, "There was something in the way they stood, like they knew something we didn't, like they had already seen how this ended." At that moment, 500 light-years away, at the edge of the Veil Nebula, a second ship was emerging from the clouds. It was not human. It was not Valorian. It matched nothing in the database of any species in the Empire or any explored region of space. It moved in complete silence and broadcast on all frequencies at once, in every known language simultaneously, and in 17 extinct ones, a single word. The word was the Latin name the humans used for their own species. Homo. The signal went everywhere at once. Every communication channel in the Empire picked it up. Military frequencies, civilian networks, deep space relays, personal devices on colony ships halfway across the galaxy, all of them received the same word at the same moment. No delays. No signal degradation. As if the message did not travel through space the way signals normally did, but simply appeared, fully formed, in every receiver simultaneously. The word was Latin, an ancient human language almost never spoken now, kept alive mostly in old texts and academic programs. Homo, the human name for humans, from the earliest days before they ever looked at the stars. The unknown ship had said it in Latin. It had also said it in every other language it broadcast, which the translation teams confirmed afterward. In Valorian Prime, the equivalent of the word was used. In the Nari, in Duresh, in Makovel, in 12 other current languages, and in 17 dead ones, it had said the same thing each time. In every language, the word was the human word for human. The ship itself sat just outside the Veil Nebula and did nothing else. It did not approach. It did not fire anything. It did not send another signal. It waited, the way the containers had waited, the way the symbols on the hull had waited with the settled patience of something that is not in a hurry because it has already decided how things will go. The Valorian High Council held 6 sessions in the next 2 days. The recordings were classified, but people who were present later described the sessions in similar terms. Loud at first, then quieter, then very quiet, then almost silent by the end. There was no good argument available to the hardliners anymore. The information was out. 3 member species had broken with the Council's position. The military commanders were unwilling to send ships toward an unknown vessel that had just demonstrated the ability to broadcast simultaneously across the entire empire without using any known technology. The political ground had shifted too far and too fast. On the second day, the resolution to suspend humanity's membership was formally withdrawn. On the third day, Essathar of the Thanari stood before the Senate again and introduced a different resolution. It called for a joint review commission, made up of representatives from all member species, to examine the history of the exploration restrictions and the missing star maps. It passed with more votes than anyone had predicted. It was not everything. It was a beginning. But beginnings, the humans had always believed, were what mattered. Commander Dross received the news in her quarters on the Ardent horizon. She was sitting at a small desk, writing something by hand, actual paper, actual pen, which most people had not seen used in decades. Sarek Vel brought her the message himself. She read it, set it down, and went back to writing. "That's it?" he asked. "That's one part of it," she said. "What are you writing?" "Letters," she said. "To the families. All 312 of them had people waiting. I'm trying to explain what happened without being able to explain what happened. It's slow going." He sat down in the chair near the door. He had nowhere urgent to be anymore. Neither did she. They had time. "The ship," he said. "The one from the Veil. What do you think it wants?" She kept writing for a moment. Then she put the pen down and turned to look at him properly. "I think I should tell you something," she said. "Something I should have said in the debriefing, and didn't." He waited. "The 6 seconds," she said. "The ones I didn't share. What I remember from those 6 seconds isn't an image or a place or a conversation. It's a feeling. The clearest feeling I've ever had in my life." She paused. It was the feeling of being recognized, not looked at, not analyzed. Recognized. The way you recognize someone you've been waiting for. She picked up her pen again. "That's what the ship wants," she said. "I think it's come to say hello, properly, now that everything else has been sorted out." A formal contact protocol was agreed upon within the week. The Empire and the human government jointly drafted it, which was itself a small miracle of politics. A shuttle was sent, a human shuttle, at the request of the unknown vessel, communicated through a follow-up signal that arrived the same way the first one had, everywhere at once, in all languages, simply and clearly stating a preference. The shuttle carried 3 people. Commander Dross, because she was the obvious choice, and everyone knew it. Sarek Vel, because Dross asked for him specifically, and no one could argue against it. And Davi Soon, the cartographer, because when the shuttle crew list was being finalized, the symbols on his skin, which had been appearing for weeks now, faint geometric lines along his forearms, that came and went like a tide, lit up so brightly for a full minute that the medical team called it a biological event, and the Human Council decided that probably meant something. The shuttle docked with the unknown vessel through a connection point that appeared in the ship's hull exactly where it needed to be, exactly the right size, as if the ship had simply decided to let them in. Inside, there were no corridors in the way a ship normally has corridors. There was space and light, and the geometric symbols covering every surface, the way they covered the hull of the Ardent horizon. But here they moved constantly, flowing and shifting, and soon made a sound when he saw them. A soft, involuntary sound, the way a person sounds when they suddenly understand something they have been trying to work out for a long time. They were not met by a person. They were met by a presence, something that communicated not through sound or even through language exactly, but through a quality of understanding that simply arrived. The same way the signal had arrived, fully formed and clear. The presence was what the ancient records had called the architects, the civilization that had finished its time in this part of the galaxy and moved on, but had never completely left. The part that had stayed was not their whole civilization. It was something smaller, something specific, a memory that had chosen to remain, a promise that had needed to be kept. They had seeded the conditions for life across the galaxy a very long time ago. They had watched civilizations rise and restrict and grow careful and fearful and small. They had watched the Valorian Empire inherit an arrangement they never fully understood, and slowly let it calcify into control. They had waited, patient as the light from old stars, for a species that would walk into the darkest part of the map, not because they were ordered to, not because they had something to gain, but because they genuinely, helplessly, irrationally wanted to know what was there. 6 missions had tried the veil before the Ardent horizon. All 6 had turned back. Fear, equipment concerns, political pressure, reasonable caution, all perfectly good reasons. The Ardent horizon had faced every one of the same reasons, and kept going anyway, because Dross had told her crew the truth on the first day. They might find nothing, and that was fine, but she wanted to look. That was the thing. Not the bravery, not the technology, not any particular skill or power, just the wanting to look. The inability to stand at a door and not try to open it, even when every sensible voice said to walk away. The architects had called it, in the oldest of the 17 extinct languages, a word that translated roughly as, the ones who must always go further. They had been watching for it for a very long time. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Dross, Sarek Vel, and soon came back to the shuttle without being able to describe most of what had happened. Not because they had been forbidden, because language was not quite the right tool for it. Soon's geometric markings were gone from his skin. He said they felt finished. He said that was the right word. Finished, not erased. The formal recognition came the following month. Not a diplomatic ceremony in the usual sense. No long speeches, no banners, no staged imagery for the press. Just a message, delivered the same way all the others had been, to every receiver in the galaxy at once. Short, clear, in all languages. Humanity was recognized as the inheritors of the open path. It was a title that had existed in the architect's arrangement from the beginning, held for the species that would eventually walk through the door the architects had left open. It came with the star maps, the schematics, the access to the uncharted regions of the galaxy, and an understanding, not a rule, not a law, that these things were meant to be shared, in time, as humanity saw fit. The Valorian Empire spent a long year adjusting to what they had become, which was smaller than they had believed themselves to be, and not as old, and not as singular. It was a difficult year for them. Some handled it badly. Most, eventually, handled it honestly. The last scene that anyone recorded of Commander Dross in those early days was at an observation deck on Velos Prime Station. She was standing at the wide, curved window, with Sarek Vel beside her, both of them looking out at the architect ship, which had moved into a stable orbit and showed no sign of leaving anytime soon. Sarek Vel asked her what she thought the architects wanted now that the recognition was done. She looked at the ship for a long time. It was enormous and quiet and old beyond imagining, and it sat in space the way something sits when it has been waiting for a long time and has finally stopped waiting. "I think," she said, "they want what anyone wants, when they've been alone a very long time. They want to see what we'll do next." Sarek Vel thought about that. He thought about the star maps, and all the worlds on them that no one had visited. He thought about the schematics, and what they could build. He thought about the Thanari and the Duresh and the Makovel, and the quiet centuries they had spent being held inside someone else's idea of how large the galaxy was allowed to be. He thought about a human crew that had sailed into the worst place on the map, not because they were ordered to, not because they were fearless, but because they wanted to know. "I think," he said slowly, "that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch." She smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that means more than a large one. Outside, the architect ship caught the light from the nearest star and held it, patient and bright and still. And the humans, small, loud, stubborn, endlessly curious, chronically incapable of leaving a question unanswered, began to plan.